What's up, guys? So every once in a while I'm perusing Amazon, I'll take a look around and see what kind of retro game related thing that I can find that might be interesting to do a video on. That's actually the process I used to find those level hike HDMI cables and the Hyperkin equivalents, which we'll do a video on another time. But one thing I can occasionally come across is Bluetooth controller adapters for different consoles. Now, I've done reviews on a few of them in the past. I did the Super Nintendo one, and I also did the PlayStation one, but both of those are from a very reputable company, 8-Bit Do. I have been able to find some other ones. So I looked up on Amazon GameCube Bluetooth and see what I could find. And what came up was this guy, the BlueRetro wireless controller adapter for Nintendo GameCube. Full disclosure on this, I know BlueRetro is a company that exists. I know that they do Bluetooth adapters, but this specific one, the Amazon listing was not from BlueRetro, it was from a company, Army. It was listed as Army. So I don't know 100% if this actually is a BlueRetro adapter, or if it just so happens to have the BlueRetro name stamped onto it to try and seem a little bit more authentic. So I don't know, but if a Bluetooth adapter is something you're in the market for, stick around because you'll want to hear about this. So let's bring you over to the table. I'll unbox the guy, show you kind of what comes in the package, show you a bit how it works, and then we'll plug it into the GameCube and see how it actually works out. And here we go. So I did a little more reading on the box, and as you can see here, it actually says, this device is powered by BlueRetro, designed by Darth Cloud, used with permission under an open source copyright. So I think BlueRetro is just this protocol that makes this thing actually work, rather than BlueRetro actually being a company that makes products like this. I was mistaken, and you can see on the UPC here, that Army name that I was talking about. Now, it does kind of give a list of controllers here that are supposed to be compatible with it. PS3, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Wii, Switch, 8-Bit, that should be Wii U, not Wii, Switch, 8-Bit Do, and Xbox Series controllers. And on the back here, it gives a few little instructions on what the different lights on it means and what the different buttons do. The important ones that you're going to need are the boot button and just understanding what the LEDs here actually mean. The big one here is the sync LED. As you can see, when the Bluetooth is fully on, it means the Bluetooth actually failed to connect. If the blue light goes off, Bluetooth connection was successful, and if it's pulsing, it is searching for the controller. That's actually very important to note, as it behaves differently than you would expect it to. Then you have the different LEDs that signify which controller's connected, and those correspond to the different colored connector ports. Yeah, I should mention, this is a 4-port Bluetooth adapter, so you have this one device and it functions for 4 different controllers for your GameCube. And this thing's in here tight. It is just a sleeve. We can throw that out of the way, and we open this guy up. There's our instruction manual. It gives general instructions. It gives how to sync a bunch of different controllers up to it, and then it gives a default button mapping for whatever controller you might be hooking up to it. So like you have whatever your base GameCube button is, and then it tells you what the corresponding buttons are on each different controller. Like you have your PS3, your PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series controllers, a Steam controller, the Wii U Pro controller, Switch Joy-Con, Switch Pro controller, and 8-Bit Do Pro 2 controller. We'll actually need to talk about something in here in just a little bit. Then you have the device itself. Again, it's very simple. It's a decent feeling plastic. It does have some give to it. It doesn't feel like it's the most high quality thing, but this is something that you're going to plug in and probably leave there if this is a device that you're interested in getting. It doesn't feel like it's gonna just break apart if I twist it too hard or something. Feel fine. They sound a little listen to this, listen. But again, who kind of cares how a button sounds on a device like this? I talked about this build quality, and I have to say that the controller plugs here actually feel halfway decent. They feel leagues above what you would get on the third-party GameCube controllers from Circa or from any of those other companies. These actually feel really solid, and they feel like they would belong on a proper GameCube controller. It has your LEDs up here, the BlueRetro branding, and then it lists out your different LEDs and buttons here. EN button, which basically turns it off and turns it back on again real fast. Your power light, your sync light, and your boot button. The boot button is going to be the important one. And then on the side here, it actually does have a USB-C port. You can plug this into your computer to update the firmware. Towards the end of the book, it gives you instructions on how to update the firmware. It doesn't do a very good job of really explaining how to do it. It just kind of tells you where to find the firmware, and then tells you which program that they recommend using, which is Node MCU-PyFlasher.exe. That's fine, but they could really do a bit better of a job explaining how to do this. You can tell this book's a little out of date too, because whenever you go to this website to find this firmware, it does not show up like what they're showing here. Updating the firmware on this guy is a righteous pain in the ass, and I did make an attempt at it. I did not film it, but I did make an attempt to do it, and I'm still not sure I did it right. Spoiler alert for the rest of the video, there was a bit of an issue with the DualSense controllers, getting those to work, and I feel like if I were able to figure out how to update the firmware, that might solve that issue. I'm not sure if it would, and to be honest, it's such a pain in the ass to do that I really don't want to bother when I still have good working GameCube controllers. All right, so the way to set this guy up is actually quite simple. It comes with 4 GameCube controller ports. Red is for player 1, green is for player 2, white is for player 3, and orange, yellow is for player 4. To where on the phone screen it looks orange, but in real life it looks yellow. But those are your player ports. Now it draws power from the GameCube, so whenever you turn the cube on, this guy lights up and starts looking for a controller to pair with. And so now we're going to test it out with a bunch of different controllers just to show you what it's compatible with out of the box. So the first thing we're going to try it out with is the 8BitDo Pro 2 controller. It does specify in the booklet that you want it to be in X input mode, which this one is. So we're going to turn the controller on, send it into pairing mode. There we go, now it's in pairing mode. And it just reacted, the blue light went off, this red light turned on telling you controller 1 is connected, and the Pro 2 controller reacted, it vibrated, and the light went steady. So let me just flip this up to look at the TV now, and you can see that it is indeed working. Now the button mapping is a little strange. It has B be the A button and Y be the B button, but that also kind of makes sense because the way the GameCube controller is laid out, you have your A and B kind of off to the left, and then your X and Y buttons are over here surrounding it, so that kind of makes sense. L and R buttons act as the Z buttons, and then your triggers act as your L and R buttons. So as you can see, it does behave exactly like it should. And now just give you an idea of what the input lag looks like. All right, now to put in a different controller, we're gonna go ahead and turn this guy off, and then you're going to press the boot button on here, and that will bring it back into pairing mode. And so I've got a PS4 controller here, so let's put this guy into pairing mode. The red light changed, the light bar went solid. Now, we've got a PS4 controller controlling our Wind Waker, controlling our GameCube. And this gives the same layout as the 8BitDo Pro 2 controller, which makes sense considering this technically emulates a PS4 controller, not an Xbox controller. This is your A button, square is your B button, triangle and circle are your Y and X button respectively. Your shoulder buttons here are your Z button, and your triggers here are your L and R buttons. And just to give you an example of the input lag, we're gonna go to the Switch Pro controller now. Let's get this guy into pairing mode, and then press the boot button one time, disconnects the PS4 controller, and connected almost instantly. And so the Switch Pro controller works just fine, and it's again laid out the same way. B is your A button, Y is your GameCube B button, X is your GameCube Y button, and A is your GameCube X button. Your Z buttons are your shoulder buttons, and your ZL, ZR are your L and R buttons. And just to give you an idea of input lag, so this next one's where things get a little screwy. We're going to use the Xbox One controller. And so we're going to get this guy into pairing mode. Press the boot button. And it does connect, but the button layout is very different and personally very wrong. So in this one, your A button is your A button, but your B button is the GameCube B button is the Y button. The triggers are correct. I can't for the life of me figure out what the menu button or what the start button's supposed to be, and also it just disconnected, so yippee for that. Alrighty, we're just gonna move on to a different controller. The Xbox One controller, not the ideal controller for this guy. So we're gonna try it with a DualSense controller now. I did have some difficulty getting the DualSense to connect, so let's see if it will, because I never really got it to. So we've got this guy in pairing mode. We're gonna put the DualSense controller into pairing mode. And like, as you can see, like it reacts here like it got the controller, but the DualSense controller is still acting like it is looking. And then the game, it doesn't react. So for whatever reason, the DualSense controller doesn't seem to want to work with it. And I've tried that with 3 different DualSense controllers, so it's not just that one that's an issue. So we've got the Xbox One controller, which gets screwy, and the DualSense controller, which doesn't like to work. But 3 out of 5 is not terrible. Another thing you're able to do with this guy is, like I said before, you are able to have multiple controllers paired up. So let's get the Switch controller paired up to it. All right, looks like it's paired up, and it is. Now, I'm not gonna really be able to show this off because I don't have a 2-player game out of storage at the moment, but you can, the boot button here allows you to connect the other controllers. You hold it down for 3 seconds until the light comes back on. It enters pairing mode for controller number 2. And then we're gonna turn our DualShock 4 back on. So, my mistake. The DualShock 4 was already keyed to look for this guy, so I pushed it in to turn on the second controller, and then just pressed the PlayStation button, and it turned on and connected to player 2. Now again, I don't have a 2-player game out of storage at the moment that I can test it with, but just note that that does work. Online, there seems to be a little bit of issues, though. It says that the Switch controllers, any controllers that mimic the Switch, it can really only handle one of those at a time. For whatever reason, having multiple of those connects to it really messes with it. So just note, if you're getting this if you plan to get this for multiplayer stuff, and you have multiple Switch Pro controllers that you plan to use, you might want to look at something else. But if you have a myriad of controllers from PlayStation, 8BitDo, and Switch, you're probably in the clear. Now, I'd like to talk for a minute about probably what is my biggest issue with this kind of controller connector, and it's a problem from one of the more interesting bits of the GameCube controller to me. Now, anyone who's held a GameCube controller knows about the analog triggers on the back, how they have the analog area, and then whenever you get to the bottom, there's a definite digital click. And that acts as a different button. You have your analog switch, and then your digital button press. Most of these newer controllers, they can do the analog, but they can't do the button press. Whenever you press the button down entirely in Mario Sunshine here, you press it down partially, it starts spraying, and you can even get like the varying levels of spray. But whenever you press it down, Mario's supposed to take a stance and you be able to then aim. But this time, I have that button pressed all the way down and I can still run around. So this does not register the digital click. And that is an issue. And because of that, also, the L button, for all intents and purposes, doesn't work in this game because the L button activated a strafe mode for Mario, but it was just the digital click. It was not the analog section of the controller. You can probably get most of the way through the game without having to worry about that, but part of it's going to be difficult, and part of it's going to just be damn near impossible because you can't plant yourself and aim. It even shows it in the manual for this guy. Right there, digital L and digital R. They don't have any button that corresponds to it except for on the Steam controller. And that's an unfortunate thing for this guy because for the most part, it does what it sets out to do. But that's a major feature for some GameCube games that will now render them unplayable. I don't feel like I'd be getting the proper Mario Sunshine experience if I'm using a controller that doesn't have that digital button press alongside the analog trigger. It's just something to be aware of if this is an item you're considering. Now, it does say in here that you are able to remap the buttons, and if that is possible, then that might be able to fix the issue I have with the trigger, with the analog triggers not registering that click at the bottom, which I feel like it should be able to do if it has some kind of, if it could register some kind of like threshold of the analog trigger, like 0% to like 90% pressed would be the analog movement, and once it gets past 90, it counts that as the digital trigger. There's one mention of it in this booklet. It is on page 4. And it says right here in item number 6, the key value of the buttons can be configured through the web Bluetooth port of the Google Chrome. Like, what does that mean? I realize that it's a direct translation to English, probably from Chinese, but to say that and then give no further explanation of how to actually change the button mapping, that decision makes no sense. And then how do you expect me to be able to figure out how to actually go and change the button mapping for your device? Luckily, that might not be an issue in most situations, as the default button mapping makes decent amounts of sense, at least for the controllers that it actually works with. So, I don't know, guys. It does do what it sets out to do. It can have multiple controllers hooked up to it at one time for multiplayer games. And if you already have a bunch of controllers and you're just looking to play some party games, then this might be what you're after. But the lack of a threshold point for the controllers that don't have a digital click at the bottom of their analog triggers really affects the experience when you're trying to play these GameCube games. There are plenty of games that do require that analog click, not just the starting movement of the trigger itself. So if this could fill a niche, then by all means go for it. It's not expensive. It's under $30 for what is essentially 4 Bluetooth controller adapters, which is a good deal if you don't expect to need the analog triggers, or if you basically just have a bunch of PlayStation 4 and 8-bit Do or Nintendo controllers. Hey, me and editing. So I went to go and find the photos from Amazon for the adapter thing, and then I saw this. Currently unavailable. Whoops. But if you're still looking, there is another option here that is in stock. And let's just, I guess, hope that it comes with better instructions than the one I got. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to bringing you even more interesting reviews like this as the days go on. Thank you guys for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one, y'all.